Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with the man, the myth, the legend, and a good friend of mine and a friend of the channel, Mr. Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great. So one of the things you put out, first off, you have an amazing Facebook group. Let's highlight it here so we don't do it only at the end. Highlight it here.
Sorry, I'm looking at my group right now. So try to look at the questions that we're going to talk about. So highlighted here, the group is called the Multifamily Investment Community. Just search for it on Facebook and you can join. There's a couple of questions you need to answer, and Facebook only shows them on computers. So please go on a first time, but then you can always use your phone after that.
Yep. Join the group. I'm a part of it. I engage again, and there's so many people doing bigger things than me. And that's why I like groups like this. I'm always trying to expand, grow. Something I haven't done is buy anything bigger than 20 units. Jonathan has. He runs a great group, has almost 12,000 members. So go join. One of the posts that I want to talk about today, I thought was funny, right? We're in the new year, was worst guru advice. I thought that was an interesting post.
Worst guru advice ever. So I put up questions in the group from, oh, where did it go? I just lost it. I can't believe it. Okay. I just tried to condense the screen so that I could see you and the questions at the same time. Gotcha. Facebook didn't like it, but okay. So I like to post questions to get conversation going, and oftentimes because I'm just curious. So I posted a question the other day. What is the worst advice you've ever heard from a real estate guru, and how did it go? And we got some good advice here. So or good responses. So let's see. Here's one of them. So worst advice you ever got from a guru. How did it go? Buy my course and it'll be all you need. Turnkey system. Right. So that is always I think a red flag when somebody tells you that it's going to be easy. All you have to do is just apply their system. And so when this member said, he got, really jacked up and excited about the course, spent $25,000 on the scarcity. It's the what do they call it? There's a term for this. Like when you go to a seminar and they sell from the stage,
back of the room.
Yeah, but it's like the back of the room rush. There's like some like a specific term to it,
I don't know,
and like where they're kind of like we're only there's only 10 spots, first 10 people who get
limited, limited supply,
and it's 25
fever,
and they don't care if you're qualified. They don't care if you actually are capable of doing it. They just want your money. So that's bad advice. Okay.
How about the ones that the first step? I've never been there personally, but I've had family, friends go to these ones that the first step of the conference is they want you to run back of the room and increase your credit card limit.
Oh yeah. Well, that's
step one. And then later in the show, it's like, let's go use it. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. That
is so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a surefire sign of like, first of all, if you don't already have a credit card limit high enough to pay for the course,
that's probably a sign.
Probably means that your credit card lender doesn't think that you are qualified to pay for that much money for the course. So, but that is a bad idea. Do not leverage your life to join somebody's program.
No, please don't. Please don't. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Sometimes you just got to jump and trust there's a net to catch you.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So that's more hypey guru advice. Clearly, the net is you. You better be like, you better be ready to.
Yeah, the net's called bankruptcy.
I mean, it's the kind of thing like when we talk about like investing in certain risky things. Like if you don't invest money, you can't afford to lose, right? And so same thing with investing in real estate. I think there is definitely some analysis paralysis and fear of pulling the trigger. And all of that is natural. And I always tell people, like, even now, like even at this, after doing this for 10 years, every time I submit an LOI on a deal, my very first thought is, oh God, I hope they don't accept it.
No, don't take it.
Because I'm like, oh my God, I'm sure
I missed something.
if they accept it, it's because I must be overpaying, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
that's just like your natural, like that's buyer's remorse. That's
Yeah.
natural. So all those reactions are totally normal to feel. And so maybe, you know, the idea that you have to take a leap of faith is true, but you take your leap of faith after you've done your analysis. You don't take a leap of faith because somebody told you, like, don't worry, it's going to work out. Like, trust the universe, it'll all be fine.
Yeah,
Right?
that's crazy.
So,
Another one I see here from Dan, I won't say last names, is don't buy a home, don't buy a house.
oh yeah, that's, you know,
That's pretty good marketing from the person who puts that out there. But yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, that whole idea of like, don't buy a house. I mean, like, look, I've written an article about this topic, which is, you know, I don't hand it out anymore. It's a lot of deep, but I had a free white paper that I used to give away that was called something like why your home is a terrible real estate investment and what you should invest in instead. And the reason I wrote that was not because it's actually a bad idea to buy a home, just that you shouldn't think of it as a real estate investment because like, you know, because you have carrying costs. People always misunderstand the analysis, right? So they buy the house for $250, 20 years later, they sell it for $500. They're like, hey, I made $250,000. And they don't realize that they probably paid more than that in expenses over time, right? So they actually they lost money on the house, but they lost less than they would have if they'd rented. It's still a good financial decision, right?
Yeah.
Own your home. It is not, but you should not.
It's not an apples to, it's not an investment, really an investment decision.
Yeah, if you want to
like that
in real estate, you invest in rental property that other people are paying the expenses on, right? That's investment. But the whole, you know, the real estate brokerage industry has put out this propaganda that says a home is a good investment.
Yeah.
And they've really messed up the way that people think about.
No, I agree.
About home. Here's someone saying Dave Ramsey thinks leverage is not a good thing for investment homes. I would disagree with. I mean, I would agree with the person disagreeing with David Ramsey. I think you should, if you can pay cash, that's fine. But I think if the judicious use of leverage is a good thing. Right?
Yeah, for me, leverage really is when you're starting out. There's no question leverage is helpful, right? No question. If you're looking to build a base, right? I talk about getting to 4. It is far easier to get to 4 with 25% down than 100% down. Once you get to 4, if your being says you want to own stuff free and clear, great. Spend the next 15 or 20 years paying those 4 off. Yeah. I strongly suggest you don't buy one, pay it off, buy one, pay it off, because the total time, and because you're just, inflation's going to kill you, right? You'll never get ahead. You might in your lifetime buy 2 instead of go buy 4, then spend 15 years paying it off and all of that. So
yeah, I agree with that. I would also, I don't know how you feel. I'm curious what you think, but I also think that, you know, the very typical way people grow is like buy it, refinance it, pull out equity, buy the next one. I think you have to be really careful with that, like because you really have to make sure. And I think when the market is rising, people tend to think, well, I'll be fine. But then what happens is when the market stops rising or you hit a recession, then what you have is a cascade of defaults and you lose everything. That's actually how, what's his name? Tony Robbins. That's how Tony Robbins started out as a real estate guy. And he lost his shirt because he was doing that strategy. And then when the recession of like 91 or something hit, just went kablooey.
Ate him alive.
He lost everything.
Yeah.
So, but if you really have to make sure if that's your strategy, that you are covering your debt service, like with some comfort at every level. So you're not pulling out everything your lender tells you can pull out of the house. If you only pull out as much as you can, still make sure that you're covering your debt service through your renters or your Airbnb or whatever it is with room to spare, right? And build up a reserve fund too, just in case you've got months of vacancy and whatnot. So
for sure. Yeah. I mean, one of my biggest mistake with my first rental unit in this book was I went to a bank after it went up in value. And I said, hey, I want to do a cash out refi. Because again, I wanted to buy more, right? I wanted to take my one and get 2 or 3. And the bank said, how much do you want? And I was an idiot. And I said, how much can I get? And they told me, and I said, okay. Never once looked at the new mortgage payment. Never once. I assumed incorrectly that the bank would be conservative. When I finally got my mortgage payment, I think the mortgage payment was $1,218. Rent was $1,095. So I was losing money because, again, I paid property manager.
Right.
No matter what, I was losing money. And that's before one thing happened. So again, yeah, you have to be careful. You have to run the numbers. I believe cash out refis are very helpful. Every refi I've done since then. Again, for me, are you building or are you near the end? Right. Now I never go above 75% LTV. And the last 2 refis I've done were 50% LTVs just because I'm in a different stage in life.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has been helpful. Right. Even though I took that cash out, I think it was roughly 40 grand. That 40 grand came 2 additional houses and 20K in reserve. So it was very helpful. No question. Never spent any of my cash outs on anything but more real estate, not a toy, not a vacation, not a lunch, nothing. The other thing that was very important, I now believe time in the market is better than timing the market, because not only have I done cash out refis, I've done 1031 exchanges. I sold an apartment at what I consider the peak. Again, I want to hold everything I buy forever until somebody wants to overpay. And then I'm willing to exit. So it's been very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's all makes a lot of sense. And I think, you sort of mentioned it in passing, but your stage of life really determines like how much risk you can take.
Yes.
Like if you're 25, right, you can get wiped out and you have plenty of time to build back.
Yeah,
right?
Agreed.
If you're 55, right, then you want to start getting conservative, and hopefully at that point you've already built up something of a nest egg, and you don't need to wring every penny out of these assets, right? What you want is you want to make sure you hold on to them.
I want to sleep at night.
Yeah, you want to make sure that the great financial crisis can happen and real estate can go down by 50% and you're still okay.
Yeah,
right? Still own the asset. So but it really all depends on.
Yeah, I invested through that market. My market went down 70% peak to trough.
That's just insane.
And we held on and we grew because, again, we had sold houses at the peak. In the book, we talk about the affordability index being that indicator for me. We sold all of our 8 houses and we went to 80 units, all 1031s. Again, my balance sheet was worth less. I don't care. You don't spend your balance sheet. Certainly when you're building, a balance sheet doesn't mean squat. Income went up, and because rents went up, expenses were flat. It was a good time. But yeah, so the last guru advice I will hit is all the people saying you don't need money. There's lots of versions of this. No money down. You don't need money to make. I mean, you need reserves. You need access to money. You need it's the game. The real estate game, in my opinion, is a money game.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not yours, but you better have some, especially if you want to be in this long term. And really the important thing for me is you got to be able to keep money. A lot of people they don't realize that you need to build your own stack eventually. Yeah. And otherwise you're just running on a rat race and you're one accident away from being wiped out.
Well, listen, I mean, Warren Buffett talks about that, right? He talks about the fact that you can have a lifetime of success after success after success, and to have it all be wiped out by one bad deal. Right?
Yeah, especially,
and that's what you want to avoid. And that's why he talks so much about building in a margin of safety on your assets. And that's become very difficult in real estate right now, to build in a margin of safety, because cap rates, when cap rates are at 5% or less for C properties, there's not a lot of room for building in a margin of safety, right? So that's why when I talk about, I mean, in last session, like if you're investing, you really have to be looking at that downside, and you really have to be really honest with yourself about, well, what are the combination of things that have to happen for my equity to go to zero, right? And how comfortable are you with that scenario? And don't downplay it. Like, don't say, oh, it'll never happen. Like, it could happen, right? So but you have to make a reasoned judgment about how likely you think it is to happen, and whether then you're, under those circumstances, whether you're willing to take the risk, right? Yeah. So let's see. I think there was one more in here. Oh,
Sure.
here's another one, another guru advice. Real estate prices never go down. Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about real estate,
Yeah.
real estate prices going down, and it has happened in our lifetime a number of times, not just once, right? I mean, we always talk about the financial crisis, but that was not the only time.
No. We've had, it is far easier for regional, which again, we all buy regional.
Right.
There are lots of times regional markets have gone down. People talk about national numbers going down 2 or 3 times in 100 years. That's not where you look. You look regionally. Lots of regional areas have gone down over the years for lots of different reasons.
So, I mean, I'll tell you like how that bad advice affected me.
Okay.
Right? So before I was in real estate full time, when I was still a lawyer, when we went to buy our apartment, I remember reading
in New York, right? Apartment in New York. Yep.
I remember reading. Do you remember the Latte Factor guy, David?
I do. Yeah, I read his book. Yeah.
And in his book, he said very, very emphatically, there has never been a nationwide decline in values.
I remember.
There have been regional ones.
Yep.
There has never been a nationwide decline in home values, right? So therefore, don't worry about it. So I was like, oh, okay, David Bach. So, and meanwhile, the recession was starting to happen, but it hadn't hit New York, right?
It was out on the edges. Got it.
Yeah, all in places like Phoenix and where you are, like those places were like crashing and burning, but like it hadn't hit New York. And I was like, oh, and David Bach lives in New York. I've actually met him a few times since then, but he was like, no, it's basically, it's never happened nationally. And I was like, okay, it's never happened nationally, and this is New York. So what could go wrong?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Fortunately, I think our leverage was like 25% leverage. So we had a lot of cushion, but literally we started losing value like the day we closed on the place. And and if we had just waited another, and I was trying to get my wife to wait, if we had waited 6 months, we could have bought a bigger apartment in the same building for less money than we paid for our apartment.
Oh, ouch.
Anyways,
but now today you're up, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, we're up. I mean, we're up a lot, right? Yeah. So
in the scheme of things, you're doing okay.
Yeah, and that just sort of proves your point too, like that if you're in it for the long run,
time in the market. Yep.
Time in the market is very important. And I always say to people in real estate, time is your friend.
Yes. I wish more people got that. Time is your friend. And you got to be, see, that's why you got to set your debts. That's why I am nervous. And we've talked about this a lot, but I'll work it in here. A lot of the syndications that are coming across my plate as an accredited investor, their debt structure does not guarantee time. At least that's how I see them. I'm like, whoa, you got to get out of this paper in a year? Are you kidding me? I get 5-year seller financing and I'm nervous. I can't imagine getting bridge debt with a year with an option for another. I'm like,
yeah,
what are you doing? That's scary to me.
So I just last sort of point on this. The folks who so there's this guy named Ben Jones. You should interview him sometime.
Okay.
Ben Jones writes a blog called The Housing Bubble Blog.
Okay.
Right? And I interviewed him on my podcast years ago when I had a podcast. And one of the things that he told me, he said, so he's been looking at this issue for a long time. This is kind of his obsession, is housing bubbles. And I remember I asked him like, who was it who lost money in the crash, right? Mm-hmm. Was it the people whose mortgages reset? He said, no, that's a myth. It wasn't the people who got foreclosed on were not the people who had their mortgages reset. It was the people who bought at the top. Basically the people who were like the last in, who overpaid the most. Right? So just having your mortgage reset wasn't necessarily the kiss of death, but the people who bought at the very top, convinced that like this was never going to go down, those were the people. And of course that makes perfect sense. It's always the people who buy at the top of the bubble who get
hurt the most. Yeah,
hurt the most. So that's why now you never know where the top is. And frankly, look, I called the top a couple of years ago and I was wrong.
Yep.
Right? It went up even I'm still astonished by how much it's gone up. but that should not, the lesson that you should get from that is not, oh, Twombly was wrong, so therefore real estate is going to go up forever. The lesson should be, you should be even more nervous now than you were 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Right? Because it's still we still haven't had the correction that lets the air out of the balloon, but we know it's happening and we're getting closer to it than we are farther away from it.
Agreed.
Right? So therefore, I'm not saying don't buy, and I'm not saying don't try to time the market. What I'm saying is when you go into these assets, do it with your eyes wide open about what could go wrong and can you get through that? And is your deal structured so that you can get through that, right? Because as we both said, time is your friend. You can write, as long as you can get through it, you can write it out, and 5 years later, you won't even,
won't even matter. Right, exactly.
Right. So
but you got to get through that.
You got to get through it. That's the issue.
That's right? The key. Totally agree. Well, Jonathan, this is a lot of fun. One more time, what is the group where this post was? It was very entertaining.
In the multifamily investment community on Facebook, and go on a computer the first time so you can answer the mandatory question, because I won't let you in if you don't. So
there you go.
Be sure to do that.
Thanks, Jonathan.